Landlord Commission. My name is David Tim, and I am the chair of TLC. Before we get started, we have quorum, and I'm just going to note the members who are present in person: John Reynolds, Sarah Lanford, Andrew Ferreira. How do you say your last name? I always mispronounce your last name.
Ferreira.
Ferreira. Yes, thank you. Andrew Ferreira and myself, I believe, here at Mukherjee will be joining us online. All right, we will start off with public comments. I think if there is public comment, it's unregistered, and so now it is the time that you need to speak up to be given a couple of minutes to speak. So I'll just pause briefly. Okay, and hearing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from last month's virtual meeting on September 11th. Commissioners, any revisions to the meeting minutes?
Nope. Move adoption of the minutes.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Any opposed to approval of the meeting minutes from September 11th? All right, and hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. We'll get started right away with the presentation on Barcroft Phase 2 relocation plan, and I believe we have two presenters, Mr. Bracy and Ms. Hagman.
Yep. Good evening. Before we get started, just wanted to confirm, Hector, did you want to share the PowerPoint, or do you just want me to go ahead and do that?
You go ahead and present yours. If you have any issues, I'll start mine.
Okay. All right. Give me 1 second to pull that up. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes, though you need to enlarge it.
Presentation mode. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that it was there. All right. Okay. How's that look?
Great.
Okay. Perfect. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Bracy, and I'm a development associate with Gyre Lynch Real Estate Partners. Tonight, I am joined by my colleague, Alice Hagerman, who is the development manager. We're delighted to speak with you all this evening about this incredible project that we have at the Barcroft Apartments. I apologize if any of you were already at the community resident meeting back in August, because this will be some of the same information that was presented then. If not, then this will be fairly new information. But before we get started, I just wanted to thank Hector Mercado for setting this up, getting us on the agenda for tonight. I want to thank Arlington County for continuing to be a great partner in bringing this renovation to life for these residents. And then lastly, to the Tenant Landlord Commission for allowing us to speak today. So let's get into it. Okay, so just a small agenda here. I'm going to get into some introductions. I'm also going to try to keep this as brief as possible in efforts to be concise and informative, but I'll obviously leave time at the end for Q&A. So again, going to talk through some introductions. Obviously, we've already introduced myself and Alice, but then we're going to give you guys a kind of an apartment renovation update and what to expect from that, as well as review the on-site transfer process, which is heavily guided by Arlington County's tenant relocation guidelines. And then lastly, we will get into the income verification overview. Okay, so brief introductions. There's myself, Brian Bracy, and Alice Hagerman. We also have Shanaz Farouk. I don't believe she's on the call tonight, but Shanaz is our main point of contact, the property manager with Gates Hudson. And then Christina Luna is going to be the APM and supporting them. So they're going to be ones that are pretty much resident facing on a day-to-day basis, but we're always in constant contact with them in case anything comes up. Okay, so for the apartment renovation update, and then also just to give everyone a quick intro. So we purchased this massive, but pretty amazing historic property in December of 2021 with the support of Amazon's Housing Equity Fund in Arlington County. As a part of that deal, we agreed to preserve the affordability of Barkoff Apartments for 99 years at a blended average of 60% AMI, which we'll touch on a little bit later. Of the total 13 or 1,335 units, this portion of the renovation will focus on what we're calling the Bravo and Charlie phase. Bravo is covering buildings 12 through 16 that you see here in the teal. 12 through 15 is on the left side of South Thomas, and 16 is a standalone building on the right side of South Thomas. And then we have buildings 47 and 48 in the orange covering 73 units in the Charlie phase. Now, we do expect renovations to begin in Q1 of 2025. So right around the corner here, each renovated home will receive upgraded kitchens. So think everything from cabinetry, appliances to flooring, and upgraded bathrooms, things like flooring and plumbing fixtures, new aluminum windows, new HVAC systems with individual controls so that residents can adjust the temperature to their liking. Additionally, we will be renovating several units to be Type A accessible. Wanted to make sure that we considered our residents with specific accessibility requirements, specific accessibility needs. So a portion of these units, I believe we're tracking around 2% per phase, will be dedicated as accessible units. And then lastly, the landscaping and courtyard improvements as well. So think of areas that will be converted into, amenity spaces that is going to continue to foster, I would say, a stronger sense of community where residents can gather, maybe have a cookout when the weather is nice out, and kind of fill in some of those areas that you see here where grass has kind of died over the years. So we want to revitalize those areas. On to the on-site transfer process. So much of the resident interviews have already started, and our property management team is leading that effort. But we continue to, as I stated before, to remain in constant contact with them in the event that anything comes up during that process. As a part of the relocation process, we are required to give residents a minimum of 120 days notice before we start that on-site transfer process, which is why today is so important. We wanted to, continue to keep the ball rolling as much as possible, as project schedule impacts can kind of have a domino effect on the overall success of the renovation, and we obviously want to be highly successful. We do expect these renovations to take about 6 to 9 months. I think that some may potentially take longer, depending on the conditions of the units, but at the very least, I would say we can expect it to take 6 months to compensate for that inconvenience that will be causing to the residents. Can understand how difficult it may be to have to move out of your current unit. Granted, you're getting a benefit at the end of the process, but definitely causing some short-term inconvenience. But we have agreed to pay all of the moving expenses for the residents. This will include all those residents that are over the 80% AMI threshold as well. But I just wanted to clarify on this point, we're not talking about, moving to another state. This is just the on-site transfer. So just didn't want that to get misconstrued. The last point about the residents being moved to comparable homes is that we obviously can't guarantee that the units will be exactly the same that they have right now, but as far as like size and layout, but we are going to do our best to give them a unit that's not going to cause too much inconvenience in the short term, given their family size and needs. All right, on to income verification. So all the residents are required to complete preliminary income verification process, and Gates Hudson has been instrumental in facilitating that process so far, and will continue to do so. When residents are moving back in, they will be guided through the HUD required income verification process to confirm that income hasn't changed. And if so, then we will be sure to accommodate accordingly. One of the things that came up during the resident community meeting was whether we would be using citizenship status as a requirement for qualifying residents for the renovation. And the answer at the time was no, and that still stands today. But because there is so much information involved in the process, we've asked the Gates Hudson team to provide a hard copy of a handout in the office, as well as through the resident portal, to kind of keep residents informed of all that's going on with the renovation. And then lastly, I just wanted to kind of touch on that table to the right on the 80% AMI residents. So AMI, just for anybody on the call that doesn't understand that, is a metric that's used to determine, eligibility for affordable housing and other subsidized programs. So it's essentially the midpoint of a specific area's income distribution, which is calculated on an annual basis by HUD. So all of these numbers come directly from HUD. So those thresholds that you see for maybe a 1, 2, 3 person household, those are going to be the annual household incomes for that size family. So the residents that are earning over 80% AMI, they will not be displaced, as we're not displacing any residents. But for those earning over 80% AMI, they will have that option to move into an unrenovated unit. And I think ultimately a market rate unit in the future, once that comes down the road. So lastly, we just want to reinforce our commitment to our existing residents. I think we love this project. We can't do this renovation without them. We understand how much of an impact it's going to be with the relocation, and we want to make it as seamless as possible. As we continue to go through the process, we will accommodate them as much as we can, as well as continue to evaluate some additional options to provide different levels of affordability. And that's all I have today.
Thanks.
Any questions?
Yeah, I think we probably do. Commissioners,
Okay.
Okay, I'll start off. Did you say when the notice will be given or has been given to residents?
As soon as we get approval, we'll be
Yeah,
going out the door.
From you guys, yeah.
Okay, and so I assume you're coming back for a November meeting then for approval?
Correct.
Okay. And how tight does that make the timeline for your Q1 2025? I'm just trying to do the math here in my head.
That's very tight. It'll definitely be critical path at this point. And, with Hector's mentioned that if residents are we certainly can't force anyone to move up before that 120-day mark, but if residents are willing to move sooner, we can. So that'll be one avenue where we'll entertain. But yeah, understanding that the 120 days is our critical path at this point.
And did you say that the resident surveys were completed or in progress?
They have not yet been started. We were waiting until first the resident meeting that we had in August and approval here with the Tenant Landlord Commission, as well as the 120-day notice. Previously, between the 120-day notice and 30-day notice was when we did all the assessments and worked on temporary unit placements.
Don't we normally have resident surveys done before? Okay.
Well, checking with Hector.
Hector, can you
They did when they started when they bought the property, they did a preliminary survey of all tenants in the complex. So they have been updating all that information. The basic information they require, they already have it. what they will need with the interviews is when they will start assessing the needs of the specific move of every tenant in location. So it's for one, they don't need the other. The interviews will consider what are their needs, for example, on school, if they need to be near the school that they're allocated. I understand they have talked to the schools in that regard. If that's not the case, also they are going to see if there are special needs for the elderly to be located under. That's what they are. She's referring on the other interviews.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. That's absolutely correct. We have done site-wide surveys and information gathering, as Hector mentioned. But the assessments I was referring to are the one-on-one interviews to get the resident specifics for their temporary unit. Correct. Thank you.
Hector, are the one-on-one resident interviews required prior to TLC's final approval in the November meeting?
No, the one-on-one is to determine special needs. The requirement is under the relocation guidelines is to get basic composition information and if they receive assistance or not, and they do have that information.
Okay.
So are we leaning to,
Yeah.
we would be approving phase B and C, is what I'm gathering, since both of them were.
I think it's called phase 2, and then that's the 2 sets of built, or the.
Well, what they have is 2 relocation plans for Section 7 and Section 1. We did approve the relocation plan for Section 3 before, and we called that Phase 1. For Section 1 and Section 7, we're calling it Phase 2 of the Barcroft relocation plans. So it does include both of them. That's why in the verification, since they are similar one or the other except for the addresses, I'm treating it as one because they're both similar.
Okay.
Can we suggest that as we go through this process, what is the scale of this? And if we can, whenever there's a map, if we can, if that map can demarcate the various phases, because right now.
Yeah, Brian, could you show that plan again? I believe you had that on one of your slides. It is, yeah, it's a lot. So on the map seen here on top right, the thicker buildings are, it's not finalized, but those are sort of a proposed new development. The skinnier buildings are the existing renovation units, existing to remain renovation units. We've already sought and achieved approval on our first phase of renovation, which Brian, if you don't mind, yeah, thank you. Where Brian's cursor is the first phase of renovations. Obviously, the blue and orange are the phases we are seeking approval on now. But you'll be hearing from us many more times over the course of this project as we have, quick math, probably 700 more, or sorry, maybe 600 more units that we'll be doing this process for.
How many people approximately are being relocated in phase 2?
Phase 2, it's 114 units in the blue buildings indicated here, the 5 buildings, and 73 units in the orange buildings.
So you don't know yet the total number of people that are being relocated?
I apologize, not off the top of my head, Brian. I don't know if you have that information.
No, because we don't know how many people per unit, like per family.
We do have it in we have it. I just don't know it off the top of my head. I apologize.
I'll give it to you in a second. That's on our documentation.
Oh, thank you, Hector. Sorry.
I think another specific request is that we would like to see the future plans. So right now, I know they're color coded, but if he can color code the future phases so we know which is group 3, group 4, group 5. I don't know how many other future construction phases you have.
Yeah, absolutely. We can certainly do that.
I think we've talked about this in previous relocation approvals, but I just want to confirm what's included in moving expenses.
Sure. Yeah. So, of course, moving costs are covered by the owner. No cost to the resident. We are reimbursing for any fees associated with relocating utilities, internet, cable service. We're providing boxes as well. Packing services are offered on not unanimously, but where accommodations are needed, packing services are provided by the owner. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of that's been requested that we are not providing is like a PO box for, temporary PO box, because USPS does have a, robust mail forwarding service that we're having the residents use.
Fair enough. Okay. And do you have a sense of how many of these relocations will be within the Barcroft community itself?
100% for this. I can't guarantee that 100%. Let me leave it for that, for these phases.
Okay,
For these phases.
I just read the numbers. So in the apartments in section 1, there are 114 apartments. Of that 114 apartments, 92 are occupied. The rest is vacant. On section 7, there are 73 apartments total, of which 48 are occupied. The rest is vacant.
Okay, that's helpful, but I am curious the total number of people. I mean, I assume there's not just one person to a unit. There are some families and couples.
We can certainly provide that by the November
Yeah.
meeting, or I
That'd be
can,
good.
I can work on digging it up now, but it'll take me just a few minutes.
No, it doesn't have to be during this meeting, but I think
Okay.
as of the next meeting would be great.
Yeah, we certainly have that information and we will provide it.
So 100% of relocations within the Barcroft, that makes sense.
Yes.
And just, you said comparable units, and I just want to confirm that at minimum, same number of bedrooms and bathrooms.
Correct. Really across the board, they all, even the 1s and 2 bedrooms only have 1 bathroom. So it's not yeah, but yes, is the answer.
Great. Then on citizenship status, I know you said it's not being required. Are you requesting that information? Or is it an optional thing? Do you say to the person in your interviews, would you tell us, and then they can answer or not? Or are you not asking the question?
It's certainly not tracked. If it's asked, I'm not in the one-on-one interviews myself, so I can't confirm that it's not asked, but it's certainly not tracked. We're not keeping record of it, or it's not. I can't imagine it's asked because we're not meeting record of it.
Yeah.
Is Gates Hudson the one who's asking in the interviews?
So our first round of interviews was by Housing to Home for the first phase. Gates Hudson will be serving as a relocation consultant moving forward. So it'll be a different vendor doing these one-on-one interviews for the second round. And we can certainly mandate that they do not ask about citizenship. I think that's a very valid request.
Yeah, I think that, of course, I don't think that is a requirement that we can enforce on you, but I think that, a lot of these families, it can be seen as like intimidating.
Sure, absolutely.
So I appreciate that. That's very good faith. Let's see. Okay, I think that was the last question that I had. Commissioners, anything else from you?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. That's why I deferred at the beginning. I'm trying to-
I guess my only concern is timing of approval.
Yeah.
It would be May, which would be in the middle of this, like towards the end of the school year for finals and whatnot. So, but would it be, I guess I'm interested in the demographics to see if that would be too much of a burden on the students.
Yeah, how much of the demographic information do you anticipate to have for TLC prior to or at the meeting in November?
By next month, I don't anticipate having the demographic data, probably any of it, because I think we were going to wait till after the 120-day notice, which would come with the approval to begin these one-on-one assessments. We do have some demographic data in the relocation plans already, but as far as like the interview one-on-one assessment with school information and more of the specific requests, that would not have started yet.
Okay, yes, I mean, I guess I just want to clarify, and maybe this is something better coordinated after the meeting, but I think Hector, I'd like to understand the requirements related to the collection of demographic information. I think what I heard you saying is that because they did a preliminary collection at the outset of the purchase, that satisfies the Arlington County relocation guidelines.
No, that's not correct. They said that they already have that information available, so that used for their the
They have-
development of, yeah. It's generally they can inquire, but the real requirement is to provide the information on, let's say, households, if they have children, what is their income, and generally that's information that's already available to them.
So
They can if they lack that, they can investigate and inquire more. But if they have it available, there is no need to go and get that information.
But
That
I
could
guess-
be updated in the future or when they do the one-on-ones.
Hector, what I'm trying to figure out is why don't we have that demographic information if they already have it?
It's what they have. It's provided in the checklist. If you go at the bottom, they have in the relocation plans, they have an appendix, and in the checklist, I had two separate sections for the profile of the tenants, one for section 1 and then for section 7,
Okay, so
and it was provided to you.
What page? It's like a long scroll.
at the end somewhere. Do you know what page it was, Hector?
Yeah, it's page 11 of the checklist. And then it starts at page 12 of the checklist for section 1 and page 13 for section 7.
Okay, all right. That's fine then. I thought that we were not getting this information. I thought, and that's what I was trying to clarify.
No, we got the information, and I pulled out this information from the relocation plans. I can check which pages are in the relocation plans.
No, that's okay. I thought based on our conversation, I thought that we were not getting the demographic information. But
No, it's there.
all right, that's the last. Oh, I was just curious. Why did you switch? Is it just because your management company is Gates Hudson? Why did you switch from house to home, or I forget the first one?
Yeah, there's nothing against housing to home. It just made sense to streamline the process. The Gates Hudson team has obviously, already working with the residents on a daily basis and fully set up on site. So it was just an efficiency thing, and yeah, made sense to us moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Fantastic. Well, thank you. Oh, Rolda.
Can you just ask if anyone on there, someone had their hand up and gone?
Oh, yeah. I just want to check to make sure there wasn't anybody on the call who had a comment related. Okay. Hey, Kira. Yeah, go
Yeah, I had a question about the tenant meeting since I didn't attend. There was an overview of it, but this has been going on a couple of years, and we've heard from a lot of concerns from legacy tenants, and I guess I like the fact that the 3% cap is mentioned both in the plan and in the review of the meeting. But I guess are there outstanding concerns from the legacy tenants that are still unaddressed? Can somebody comment on that?
Yeah, Brian, I don't know if any specific concerns were brought up in the meeting. Go ahead, Brian, please.
No, not from, you mean that as a concern of it,
Just
the
general
rents going up?
concerns.
No, not from the meetings. That we didn't have any questions or comments on that.
Yeah,
We can check with
Okay.
Gates Hudson if anything has come, through their channel, but nothing from the resident meeting.
And we are, very committed to the 3%. It's written into public documents in our master finance and development plan. Yeah, very, very much committed to the 3% annual increase cap for current residents.
Okay, was that it? Thanks from you, Kira. All set? Great. Well, thank you both, Mr. Bracy and Ms. Hagman, for your time. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have an evictions update, and I think we've got two sequential related presentations on the topic. One from LSNV with Ben, and the other is DHS. I believe Heather Benner is presenting there, and I guess I will allow like more of a guest technically in LSNV to go first. Although it looks like we've got someone with their hand raised. Marco, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me, everybody? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi. Good evening. Yes. Thank you. I'm running the volunteer group of the meetings that we have once a month. So the same, go back to the last meeting, we have the same concern that we would like to know, just to inform the rest of the residents, I would like to see when you have like a month previews to show us that all the residents that they're moving from the buildings that they're going to be renovated, where they're going to be able to park their vehicles. If they're going to come to our buildings, we're going to have market parkings, so nobody will lose a spot, or if we have market parking streets, or wherever they're going to be moving. Have you guys thought about it? Do you have a plan already? Do you have already planning where they're going to park these residents? Because the constructions will be with the trailers, tractors, and all that equipment, garbage containers on the way. Where are they going to be parking these residents? So we don't have to worry about it. They will be towed, they will be damaged, and et cetera, et cetera. We would like to see like you have a plan where they're going to park, or issuing some permits temporarily from Arlington County. The towing will be notified. Residents will be okay to park there. They won't have any problems during the process. So we are in peace and can go to sleep. Wake up in the morning with our cars outside and not be towed or, this abuse gone.
Okay, I think I understand your question is basically just about parking coordination for the relocation during renovations.
Correct.
And it seems to me that the people who could answer your question just left because we finished that agenda item.
I can answer that.
Great.
Basically, the sections that are going to be cut off will be without parking, because that parking will be used for their construction equipment, materials. But the rest of the complex, and the complex is huge, will still have available parking. You don't need another permit because you already have the permit that allows you to park anywhere in the building. And you already know the rules on parking outside. There are some sections that you can park and some sections that you cannot. It will all still be the same. unless your car is blocking one of the accesses for trucks or equipment, it won't be harmed unless you park it illegally. And I don't think you'll be able to do so. So I don't think parking will be an issue. There is no need for extra parking because there is a lot of it in the area. And then the number of tenants that are being relocated are already there and the parking will remain the same. That's my answer. I can try to find more information on that regard, but that's the basis of it.
Mark, I have a clarifying question for you. Is it your concern is that because of the construction equipment, it reduces the parking capacity on the
Yeah.
complex? And
Yes,
therefore,
that's always the reason, because many construction companies, we don't know how many they're gonna be on here. They have, trash containers, they have heavy duty equipment, they have the trailers with their equipment for demolition and new installations, we got plumbers, electricians, et cetera. And they occupy large spaces and they fence their equipment to be protected from vandalism and all that. And then everyone is like, okay, do we have a space that we can park?
Yeah.
All those things,
Hey,
so
Marco,
yeah.
can you direct the question via email or provide your email either way to Rolda or Hector, and we'll coordinate with Gates Hudson to get like a clear answer from the property manager.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know how to find Rolda or Hector's email, or do we need to read it aloud for you?
Yes, I don't have emails information. I guess he's the one who's really right now. I guess I would like to have his email so I can contact him, and I can get updated on that one. That way you can type in the message, and I will copy from there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Hector, would you put your email in the chat for Marco? Okay, thanks very much for that. We're going to move on to the next agenda item, which I'll have Ben Apt start us off on.
Could you have Heather go first, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's have Heather go first. Sorry, Ben.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Heather Venner with the Department of Human Services. Ben and I work very closely, so to be honest, we might do it in tandem. Ben, I'm glad to tag team this with you, but I think Rolda wanted me to just give an update on the dashboard, the eviction prevention dashboard. So I could start that off really quickly and give you guys an update on what we're seeing for this fiscal year so far. So you guys can have an working knowledge of the amount of eviction prevention that we're working with. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you guys will be able to see it. This is the eviction prevention dashboard, which I think you guys have access to. I'm not sure. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So this is what we run our data out of, right? All of the data for eviction prevention sits in this app. So this takes us from clients to request payments, and we tabulate all of the eviction outcomes that we work with Ben App in court with on this document. So this is I kept it from this fiscal year, July 1, 2024 to yesterday. This would tell you the amount of clients that we have seen. We look at the different demographics from language. We looked at ethnicity, and as you can see, this does not really change a lot. I don't know how much you all know, so I'm just standing off from this year, fiscal year. This pretty much holds throughout the pandemic to now. So we have only had this app in place since July of last year. So we don't have a whole lot of data to go back on. Everything else we relied on the state because they track this. Primarily what we're looking at, a lot of the households are female-led, a lot of times single. Non-Hispanic continues to be the highest level of ethnicity folks that we see. And this one changed a little bit for us because now we're seeing the highest age group from 30 to 39. Throughout the pandemic, it was really between these two groups that we really saw really large numbers. And this also shows us that a lot of the folks here are African American by race. Any questions on this dashboard? We also track any subsidy that folks have, from housing choice voucher to housing grant, folks that didn't have any, or folks that don't have any subsidy or any other ongoing subsidy and permanent supportive housing.
Is
Any
this-
question? Go ahead.
Yeah, is this dashboard publicly available?
It is, but it's a little bit more rated, like it doesn't have some of the information that we would normally have, but this is publicly available.
Do you, can you, well, I guess, is this version of it available to TLC?
Yeah, I think Russell has it. Russell Schroeder, who's a CPHD, he has access to it. So I think it is available to the TLC.
Okay, can we just roll the later, get whatever that link is to be distributed? Thanks. Continue. Thank you.
Any questions about this page?
No, I mean, it looks really like, wow, like a good app. I mean, the breakdown. Looks,
All of our data syncs into it. So I just wanted to show you, because I just came off, because it gets really tricky if I don't stop sharing to switch to the other one.
I guess-
Okay, so let me,
I guess
go ahead,
one-
I'm listening.
Yeah, about the data, how is it inputted? Like, does it have to be someone who's working with Ben or with LSNV or with DHS to be inputted?
All DHS. This is all inputted by DHS workers that work with the eviction prevention.
Okay, right, but let's say that I get, you know, I get evicted tomorrow.
Mhm.
How does DHS know that I got evicted, or do they?
We do, because we go through the court docket.
Okay,
And if you don't, if you get evicted and you never reach out to us for assistance, you're not in here. But if you have reached out to us, your information will be inputted in here. And that is something Ben could talk about, how we collaborate, because some folks don't want their information in systems, but that doesn't mean that we won't help them, right? And this is something that we try to look at in how best to assist folks, because some people, when they go to court and we reach out to them either by Ben or by us, and they say, yes, I need help, we will put their information in here if they agree. And if they don't, we give them outside resources to get assistance. But when we track our data for eviction prevention outcomes, I will show you, you'll see a difference in the amount of people that are evicted versus the ones that we help, because not everybody gets that assistance. So request, somebody said something?
yeah, Andrew has a question.
So I have two. You said the data showed that it was mostly African American, a majority were African American.
Yeah, let me go back to that page. Hold on.
Is there a trend? Is it certain properties, certain landlords that are, or is it just the, I guess, the trend in the county rather than it being a specific landlord or properties?
I'm going to try to repeat what I think I heard. Are you asking if this is what's happening throughout all of evictions, or is it based on property? Is that your question?
Correct. Like, is it isolated to like a certain properties in certain sections of the county?
We do not measure that.
Landlords, and that's just a trend.
We don't measure that based on property. What we have just started this quarter, which we are going to track, is the amount of assistance per property that receive assistance from us. We don't track based on race by the property or ethnicity or anything. We do not track that based by property. That is not something we track.
And I know, and of course, the print's very small, so it could be somewhere in your presentation. But what was the main reason for eviction? Was it violation of the lease, a non-payment?
The primary reason for non-payment is non-payment of rent.
Yeah.
And I just want to follow up on Andrew's question. I'm sorry, when you engage with someone, are you collecting the information on which building they're at or not?
Yes, we are going to start that this year.
Okay.
What we did is by property. And what we realized, sometimes it's sometimes the property manager, because a lot of properties have different property managers. So we are trying to look at the properties now themselves. So that's what we have started this year.
Okay, so but you've just started it this year. Is the data in the dashboard? I'm sorry, it's just hard to see.
No, it's not in the dashboard yet because they're trying to figure out how to put it in here.
But it will be.
We're still working on that.
Okay. Okay, I think that, yeah, that's really interesting. That's something we just had a whole subcommittee focused on for 8 months. So we'd be very interested in that data.
Okay. And so this is the amount of requests. One of the things that we recognized in the pandemic is that the different zip codes, we were seeing more requests. So what this dashboard does that's really cool is like, this is zip code 2204. We have total amount of requests from there is 366 requests so far from July 1 through yesterday. And we could see which one of our zip codes has the highest amount of requests. And this is pretty much the same that we had throughout the pandemic, where 22204 was our highest, 2206, 2203. So we looked at our eviction prevention efforts based on this data that we have. So this is what we could be able to tell how many people from this zip code came in, or 22207 or 2209. Any questions on this page?
No, and I just want to confirm something that I asked earlier about whether if someone declines to have their information included. So you said you look at the public docket. So if I got evicted tomorrow, you would know, but you don't have any demographic information for me, presumably.
No, if somebody doesn't want their information in, which is less than 0.001%, I'm sure, we do not input any of their data in here other than the general number that we get off of the docket, which is public information.
So you do include the number of evictions, but you just don't add the secondary pieces of data. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And
So
we don't only go off of the docket in terms of the amount of people that are going to be evicted. We get our data from the sheriff of those who were actually evicted. So
Right.
Because a lot of times when we meet people in court that have a writ or about to be evicted, we try to stop that eviction as best as we can. And when we stop that eviction, that's no longer an eviction. So that's why we choose the sheriff's number of the actual eviction. And that's why I said it looks very different from what is the evictions in the court on the docket.
And so the information that you're showing is all final evictions that have actually occurred. The sheriff has executed.
I've not shown you that yet. This is all request.
These
for
are
eviction
requests.
prevention. Yeah, these are requests.
Yeah.
People requesting eviction prevention. These are the folks that are requesting, hey, I can't pay my rent.
Yeah.
And these are the requests that people come in and how we are able to help them.
Okay, great.
Okay. Any other questions on this? I do want to point out that we do have an annual cap of $3,000 per calendar year. That is something that we are very flexible with at times, but a lot of times, especially if somebody can show that they could pay going forward, and especially if it's a family with minor children, we try our best to be able to assist them regardless of the cap. But we do try to hold on to the cap as best as we can, but we do recognize the need to be able to keep people housed as best as we can.
Do you refer out to nonprofits after people have reached the cap, the $3,000 cap for additional funding?
We do at times, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the schools, like just today, I was dealing with a nonprofit that deals only with the schools. They will reach out to us because they have a certain amount that they can do. So if the person owes $11,000 and they say, hey, Heather, we could pay $4,000, would you help us with the difference? So sometimes we do it in conjunction with some of the nonprofits.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's still one.
It's still more. I think he's over. But there was something in the.
Keep going. We were
Okay.
just discussing a hand raised, yeah.
Okay. So this is the amount of money that we've been using. It's pretty high. For those of you not understanding how much should we spend, this is pretty on the higher end, and I'll tell you why. In July of this year, we looked at two things at the beginning of this year, calendar year. We looked at how many people are really sustaining their units coming out of the pandemic. And in January, we said, let's look at making sure people are stably housed and see how well they're able to keep it throughout the year. We did that, and we kept a lot of people stably housed. And then in June, at the beginning of the next fiscal year, I said, let us see if we can make sure people can make it over the hump of the middle of the year. So we had what is called eviction prevention fears. We went to the biggest landlords, the bigger ones, APA, AHC, all of those, and we had eviction prevention fears for all of their units. We also had one in the community for those that are in smaller apartments, so they could come and get the assistance that they needed. So that's why these are as high as they are, because we were able to meet people where they are, and it was all done on weekends in case somebody could not make it to our offices during our regular business hours. We had them on a weekend, and we saw a lot more people than we thought we would see. We also were able to interface with a lot of the property managers that were really telling us some of the things that we were seeing beyond the other causes of evictions other than failure to pay rent. So those were some of the things that we saw while we were in the community. So that's why our threshold for these months were very, very high in terms of rental assistance. So we were able to assist folks in July and August to help people remain stably housed. That's why our eviction rates right now are so low, because we did a lot of efforts in July and August to keep people housed. Any questions on that?
No, great work.
Okay. So this is what I was talking about in terms of the eviction prevention outcomes. And I'm sure Ben will talk more about this because he is the mastermind behind a lot of this. So this is the total amount of people, evictions that were on the docket in FY24 year to date. Total number of households on eviction docket that received eviction assistance, and the percentage of household provided eviction prevention assistance that still ended up in the docket. So we decided to start looking at this because we were saying how many people that were on the eviction docket, how many of them are we really helping to get the assistance to remain housed? One of the things that we are different in Arlington County than other counties, there are caps on assistance, yes, but what we try to do is to make sure that the family, if there's a way for them to pay going forward, we can assist them as best as we can. Arlington County only has one family shelter. If people get evicted, we don't have anywhere to put them. I don't have any other nicer way to say that. But we are trying our best to keep people housed as best as we can so that they do not get evicted and have nowhere to go. Because we have one family shelter and it remains full the entire time. Any questions, guys?
Do we collect any demographic data on their employment? Is it like they lost a job and therefore that's why they fell behind on rent, or they're more of a shift worker and their hours were cut, or they're salaried but they're not making them enough to sustain the family?
I would say that's the primary reason, but I don't know what percentage. We don't track the crises because they vary from A to Z. But that is a primary reason. A lot of times at the height of non-payment of rent is loss of work hours or loss of job. Primary reason for non-payment of rent, where people get 2130s or people are evicted for whatever reason, is for hoarding or cleanliness or behavioral issues. So those are the main reasons that we see people being evicted for. Any other questions? Ben, did you want to take it from here? Because I know you know more about this than I do, so I would If no more questions for me, I turn it over to my amazing colleague, Ben App, who
I
knows it all.
really, I really don't. In fact, I don't warrant the compliments, but I reciprocate them. It's Heather who is the Chacham, as we would say in Hebrew or Yiddish, who's the wise person who knows all of this information. And I'll start with a caveat. I'm trying to collect and collate more data from our cases, but LSNV is not a reliable source for data or a reliable source for a portrait in data of people who are facing evictions in Arlington County because we serve those who come to us. And I can't exactly tell you how people reach us. We do a lot of promotion. The courts help us. We leave pamphlets there. They have signs about our services. But my hunch is when I'm at the courthouse every week doing what we call eviction outreach, my hunch is that most of the people whom I see appear for hearings are people who would qualify for our services, and almost none of them are people who've come to us. So that's concerning. I would also conjecture that by far the majority of people whom we serve are below the AMI, the rough AMI that Barcroft is serving. That is, I suspect that most of our clients are within the 40 to 60% AMI range. They're quite poor. Exceptions may be people who are elderly, whom we are then able to serve under Title VII, which is a different federal provision, and we don't screen for income for people who are over 60. So keep in mind what we see and what I can report on is anecdotal. I've turned to the Legal Services Corporation, which has a Virginia office, of course. This is a quasi-federal agency and one of our main providers of funding. For additional statistics, they don't have very much either. So I've been reaching out to the statistician who employed by Alexandria City. They do a very good job of collecting data to see if there might be a better way for us to get a better picture overall in data of what's happening among evictions in Arlington. But that's still up in the air.
Well, Ben, the information that Heather just presented on, isn't that functionally as good as it could get? Or is there still improvements that could be made with regard to that data? Obviously they're collecting more coming soon about, which property it is, but what are the gaps in the data that they just showed us?
Well, Heather should correct me because I might be making misstatements. But yes, their data are going to be more complete than ours. First of all, they collect data. We do have income information, but we haven't collated it. That's something I hope to change so we can start getting a sense of who our clients are who are getting evicted in Arlington. But keep in mind that the people who go to Heather's agency are, again, people who know to do so. And when I'm doing eviction outreach, there are always people from Heather's agency present. And thank goodness for that. They're very capable county workers. And they also promote the rental assistance program. But again, it's a matter of catching the clients who are the tenants who show up that day. It's a matter of whether you can help people. Some people may just be disqualified off the bat because they owe so much. And also a very important figure is, according to the data I've seen from LSC just for the past month, and I wonder if it isn't an understatement, about 1/3 of people who are scheduled for eviction hearings do not appear. And it's not because their cases have been dismissed or non-suited beforehand. That may happen, but I suspect that's a very small number. I think most of the people who don't appear get default judgments. That is, they lose. And we don't know why they don't appear. I mean, if they're my client, I pretty much emphasize that they should go to court. And even then, that doesn't always happen. But it's probably a lot of people who are not in touch with LSNV, who may well not be in touch with the county, who are probably low income, and who may be avoiding going to court for all sorts of reasons. Improper service of court notice, could be language barriers, could be intimidation because they fear maybe immigration authorities, who knows? But it's a significant number of people who are simply losing right from the start. I'm going to go into a different theme, and this is one for which again, it's anecdotal. I don't have data other than my personal experience. But one problem that we are hearing about, I would say increasingly and with great intensity from the people whom we do serve, are their difficulties with property managers. And to some extent, this might be predictable and probably is always true. There's going to be friction between tenants and not so much landlords as those who represent landlords. That is, property managers or people in the leasing office. I mean, if there's going to be friction between tenants and the folk who oversee the buildings where they live, that's where it's going to be, between them and the property managers. But I don't think that's what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing are really disturbing stories about people who can't even get in touch with staff on the property manager in the property management office. Appointments aren't kept. There are no responses to their complaints. The turnover is far more rapid even than the turnover among owners of buildings. I mean, within a year, people may see 3 different companies or more employed as property managers. Even among those companies that act with the best of intentions, there's an enormous loss of information. Relationships with tenants just evaporate when a new company comes in. Promises that were made to tenants, say even for reasonable accommodations, may be lost, and the tenant then has to go through the effort of renewing the promise, and property managers are not always receptive, we've discovered, to requests for reasonable accommodations. And I'm emphasizing this because I find it startling that I hear it so often from so many clients. And it strikes me that it's not just grumbling about, oh, I'm having a hard time with maintenance or property management. It's more, I can't even find people to talk to. So if you were to ask me for an overall impression of what's happening among people who are facing eviction or among tenants, particularly vulnerable tenants in Arlington, my impression, just as one lawyer with LSNV is, and I have the same experience, it's just very hard to find anybody to talk to representing a landlord to get a problem tackled.
Yeah, I agree, Ben. I think this year has been different than all of my time on TLC since 2019. I don't know what it is, but the management companies, even if the management company isn't changing, their personnel are changing.
Right.
And I think your point about institutional knowledge being lost is really critical.
Hi, Ben. Thank you so much for bringing these concerns to us. As a tenant representative on the commission and not a vulnerable tenant, I'm never worried about affording my rent. I speak English. It is impossible to get in touch with my building management. And I'm a white woman who has a lot of time on my hands. And I have I say that to say that I have all of the skills required to communicate with these people, and it is impossible, to the point where I have complained to this commission about my property management. So I can't imagine what it feels like to have any type of barrier to doing that. And I'm curious, if you had a magic wand, what you would require of property managers to alleviate some of this, because it is absurd.
My magic wand would be contractual requirements and liability, that you spell out that any new property manager be tied to a contract of service, evidence-based, and that there be liability for failure of service. Now, I can anticipate problems. I mean, I've heard of just recently from one client who said, well, I deal with a property manager who's been here for 23 years. She knows her stuff. She's not very good about passing bad news on to her management or to the landlord because it makes her look bad. She's dinged for it. So our problems may end up being unresolved, not because she's unaware of them, but because she is unwilling to expose herself to any pressure to get them taken care of. So there's clearly a problem there. I mean, rather
Yeah, I
than
mean-
having a system where a landlord is learning about what's going wrong and getting fixed, the landlord's not learning about what's going wrong at all.
Yeah,
Um,
I was really nervous. My rent, I would get a renewal offer that would skyrocket because I raised so many issues with my property management and it didn't happen. But I mean, that's, I think, a common fear is that if you're bugging the property management all the time to fix things that they are responsible for in their lease that you have signed, that is their duty under Virginia law, and they're not doing it and you keep raising it, it just seems like there's no enforcement
Right.
mechanism and no stick, and that tenants have no power in this situation. It's very frustrating. I guess.
I mean, I can tell you what I do for enforcement, and it's not great. Oftentimes, the larger landlords are represented by an attorney, and I'll get in touch with the attorney and I'll say, could you please talk to the property manager, right? Because I can't talk directly to the property manager because the company's represented by an attorney. So the route is I hear a complaint from a tenant who makes it to me, the lawyer. I make it to another lawyer who then goes back to the property manager. One hopes this happens all within a brief time and that it's effective and that the lawyer whom I'm talking to cares. So that's my solution. If there's no lawyer, I can talk directly to the property manager if they're unrepresented, but that's pretty unlikely. And I don't even know how effective that is. And again, I'm not talking to the property manager's boss. I'm talking to the property manager. Lord knows where the owner is, maybe out of state.
Yeah.
So David's probably heard this from me before. When I'm an old lawyer who's been doing all sorts of law before I got into housing. And one of the unfortunate epiphanies that I've had working in this area is I started out thinking that I was going to be representing people mostly who were complaining about poor conditions. Of course, the number of evictions is so overwhelming that doesn't even get to conditions, but also Virginia law makes it difficult for tenants to complain about conditions, at least through the judicial system. For one thing, they have to be paid up on rent. For another, they have to know what it is that they can effectively complain about. But what this all means is, as almost an afterthought, I will hear from tenants about rats and mold, and I don't think they're making it up or exaggerating, but that's secondary to what they've come to me about, which is their eviction. In other words, I want to be able to stay in a rat-infested apartment because if I'm not there, I have no home.
Yeah.
So the conditions don't even come forward. Another huge problem is just people's knowledge of what they can do. I mean, my mantra is always write it down. So property managers get complaints that aren't written. Someone comes to me later on and says, I told the property manager, for example, I asked for a ramp. I need a reasonable accommodation. How can I get the property that installed? And I have to say, well, did you write it? What evidence do I have if we start litigating against a landlord that you ever made this request? So
But I think then
basic
that comes
knowledge
down
of the
to-
law among the public, and I don't really know how to address that other than to do presentations as much as I can. And that's true for the county and other organizations, and that's really uphill.
Yeah.
Sorry, I apologize for my vehemence, but
No,
it's not a
refreshing.
great scene.
I was just gonna say that issue circles back to the initial problem of getting in touch with the property managers. If you don't know how to contact them, how are you gonna file a written complaint?
Or if you don't know how to contact them in a way that gives you judicial recourse and they know that.
Right.
Maybe I don't know if this is even permitted during county law, but similar to like you have like the labor law equal EOC posters, and everyone's required when you walk in, like, here's the property manager, here's their email, here's the regional manager, here's their email, somewhere in the lobby area or somewhere accessible.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's an unreasonable ask, but.
I mean,
I'm not aware that that's required in Virginia. What is required is that every lease include a full statement of residents' rights and responsibilities. And it has to be an updated statement or a current one, and they're often updated annually, not always, but often. And of course, we often have clients who never receive such a statement, or at least going on what their lease shows, they received the signature page, but we don't see evidence of the rest of the statement, or it's an out-of-date statement. And even though that lists their rights and responsibilities, it doesn't list numbers for recourse. And the worst part is it's all part of a lease, right? And reading a lease, and this is true for lawyers, reading a lease is something like not that different from closing on a house. Who reads through all of that prose with a critical eye?
I do, but again, like, I have a lot of time on my hands, and I know that if I don't, I'm gonna get screwed over. But I don't think that a lot of people know that, or have the time, or speak the language, or know that they have rights, or that they can push back against things that they don't like in the lease, which my landlord always hates. But I don't know. I'll throw it out there again. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think we should publish how many complaints we get about certain property managers. There are consistent complaints. And I wish I had a directory as someone who rents in this county of which property management companies consistently have people come before us and complain, or have certain people being sent to eviction court. Like, I know that there are fears about that, and rightfully so, but I think there's a way you could do it that is pretty just the facts, ma'am. So I'll keep saying that until I'm blue in the face.
Well, landlords need to be liable for those whom they hire as property managers. And I know that's really facile to say, because if there's high turnover among property managers, you're probably stuck as a landlord trying to find a good and reliable one. But still, the buck has to stop there. But there also have to be, I don't know if it's certification requirements or what, but there has to be some way. I joke that a start out job for a kid out of college is either a cashier at Safeway or property management. That shouldn't be, right? I mean, people should know what they're doing.
Yeah.
As to reading the lease, I'll just tell you a small anecdote. I won a case recently for a tenant whose landlord, he was pro se, never bothered to read the clause in his lease that said he had to go to arbitration before going to court. So everybody doesn't read the lease.
That's a fun win. Yeah.
I don't know. Were you done? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. I have one more question. You mentioned that most people you see in court would qualify, but haven't approached.
I suspect. I don't know, but I suspect.
Yeah, and I would believe that. What do you think could help solve that? Is it a lack of publicity? Is it a lack of knowledge? And what do we do to bridge that gap?
It is a lack of publicity. I mean, we are essentially a public agency. We aren't supposed to go soliciting business, although it's not as though it brings us profits, but the courts, the court, at least in Arlington, is a friend. I mean, that's not true in many counties, I gather, from what I hear. Again, maybe just a placard in the lobby of every building in multiple languages, but passive availability of information is hardly a key. It's certainly better than no information, but it isn't really enough. I mean, ideally, when people rented an apartment, they'd be talking to an informed person in the leasing office who told them about their rights. I don't know how
Ben-
often that happens.
Ben, can I just say one
Yeah.
thing here that's a struggle for me? While I think Ben and Day can do everything, unfortunately, because of federal dollars, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, they are not able to advocate,
That's right.
work with folks that are undocumented.
Right.
And that is a huge gap in a
Yes.
resource for us, because while we put everything else Ben's way, we can't send the undocumented immigrants that a lot of this, and I'm going to use the word very liberally right now, retaliation of a lot of property managers
Right.
is against these folks. And that is one of the struggles that we have, because we have to go off of whatever knowledge we have gained from what they can do from other cases to be able to give them the wisdom to be able to move forward in some of these cases, because they are the brunt of a lot of evictions because they don't have the representation.
They are the most vulnerable people. Linguistically, they fear about their legal status. There's Legal Aid Justice Center, which operates in this area and relies purposely just on private funding so that it can avoid the federal stricture against serving undocumented immigrants. But because we get a portion of, it's maybe a plurality, but it's certainly not the majority of our funding, but still, we get a portion of our funding from LSC, and therefore we are not permitted to work with undocumented immigrants on any topic. There are exceptions, such as under VAWA in certain cases, but and human trafficking. But for the most part, if someone approaches me and needs help and it turns out, or he approaches our intake and it turns out he's undocumented, then that's the end of our service to that person.
Well, thank you both so much for coming, and I could personally talk about this and get angrier and angrier for many hours, but we do have to keep our schedule. Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing here? Either of you?
No, except that I hope to be able to collect more data to be more informative with numbers in the future.
It sounds like you can rely pretty well on DHS's data.
Oh, yeah.
Public data, yeah. So yeah, I think that coordination there is going to be really important. Heather, I'll just ask, and Rhoda, you know, the minute we start getting any data that's significant on evictions, or, you know, in the process of evictions related to properties, we want to, you know, work with that data to see if there's something we can do to intervene. And you know, what Sarah was saying earlier, I think that we're about to close out a subcommittee. Maybe we'll renew it with a different focus on you know, we've talked in the past about like a gold star program or something like that for landlords, yeah, that are doing the right thing, that are, you know, that have low eviction rates, or that are working with the county when they have problems with tenants, and that are passing out rights and responsibility, you know, flyers. And I know we do this with some that received funding from Arlington County already, but I think we want to try to expand that program. So I think that's going to be a focus of TLC in the coming year, and we will continue to seek your advice and input on that as we move forward. So thank you very much, both of you.
Great. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to legislative priorities. Rhoda tallied all of the 2 priorities that everybody submitted. Thank you all for that. And I think we had the majority of votes for number 4, which was a court receivership for buildings that are, I forget the precise terminology I had.
Allow general courts to place residential buildings in the receivership when the property manager or landlord repeatedly fail to address significant maintenance, health and safety issues in the building to ensure that the repairs are made and tenants reside in a habitable
Exactly, that one.
environment. Pretty wordy.
In the past, I think we've selected 2, and as we were talking about here, but we have 2 more that tied, number 5 and number 7. Number 5 was referred to buildings that are condemned where tenants will then receive money for essentially being evicted from those condemned buildings. And number 7 was related to state, yeah, the mold, right. My suggestion is, since we've got a pretty clear plurality for all 3, is that we just adopt all 3 of them. And so we'll have a discussion. You guys can agree with me or disagree with me. We can talk about it, and then we'll make a vote. I'll write a letter with these 2 or 3, whichever we settle on, and send it to the county board tomorrow. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Those were the ones I voted for, so I'm in favor. Wasn't number 7 what we did last year?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I guess my only hesitation on 5 is that how often is that the case in Arlington?
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, I haven't heard of a building being that bad that it's condemned. But
It's a good point.
Rhoda, I'd like to know from code enforcement if that's a common,
I don't know, but
or
we
is this
can
more
ask.
of like a unicorn?
I don't know, but we can ask if they have any statistics.
Who voted for 5? Who voted for 5?
Kristen and John.
And all right. Well,
That's my only hesitation not including it.
Yeah, I know,
I mean,
I
I'm
agree.
in favor of putting it in, we all concur.
Yeah.
But I don't.
I'm about being proactive.
well, and I mean, these are legislative priorities for the state, so theoretically we can care about things outside of our county's borders.
Yeah.
So I was like thinking, like, it's not like the situation in Lower Arlington, off, I think Columbia Pike, where they were gonna do that residential like apartment development, except it went through like 2 different construction companies, fire, mold, and all that, and they were like, you know what, let's just keep it a strip mall instead. But like a circumstance like where it'd be like another apartment complex where maybe they have like mold in one, back corner, and just like it gets so bad that it has to be condemned. But the other side is fine. But it's like, oh well, we never knew about this. Where do we go? Where do we do now? So I was kind of thinking like, you have like that shady, owner kind of like you got by so long until somebody kind of has to kind of intervene. That's what I was thinking of, like practice. Yeah. It stemmed from business, but I was like, I can see it like from, I guess, my experience like living in Norfolk and other areas like that where, there's
more common.
yeah, and I think in one of the meetings we had once where, and this is probably in the spring, where they were talking about, or neighborhood college I was in, where they went to, they're talking about how many inspections they do for the county per year on, building, but they don't do it every year. I think it's like you only get through maybe like, don't quote me, like 60% or so per year. That still leaves like a nice sizable chunk that that can easily slip through. Because always depending on how many contractors can do it, then the follow-ups, but then also what's the budget for next year with the county. They might just say, you know what, let's just put on hold. Our priorities change, so.
Yeah, you swing me.
Well,
Or could you range choice with me?
No, well,
I just slip that in.
I did that. I filed my absentee ballot today. Yeah. I'm wearing it for the meeting so that all of them can see that I voted.
I voted yes.
Same here. Straight from the gym.
Yeah, I guess like.
There's always the school board that I have to like read up on the candidates.
Yeah. Yes, I guess that's why. If it was more for Arlington focus or state, if it's state focus, then yes. Fine.
Yeah,
I don't foresee it being.
again,
I
these
mean, I
are
haven't
like,
really heard of it as an Arlington problem.
yeah, again, these are our recommendations on what we think the Virginia legislature in general should do.
Okay.
So, okay, I mean, it sounds like everybody's generally in agreement. Kira, do you have any disagreement with picking all 3?
No, I don't, although, 5 and 7 seem to be related topics, but that's fine.
Yeah, they are related. Yeah, you're right. Okay, well, then can I get a motion to approve the letter as I've laid it out, which would endorse numbers 4, 5, and 7? Okay, can I get a second? All right, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Kirit, are you in favor?
Aye.
Great, and
Aye.
I don't believe we have any opposed, so the motion is unanimously approved. That brings us to the resolution. Oh, I'm sorry.
So it's 4, 5, and 7?
4, 5, and 7, yes. So that brings us to the subcommittee report, which everyone should have. I'm pretty happy with this report, and I will say that I think this is, this is the report that probably is going to lead into the next effort that I was just briefly outlining about. I don't know what else to call it except for Gold Star landlords right now. I'm sure there's a better thing for framing, but that's how I've conceptualized.
Landlord and property management accountability.
Yeah, but that sounds scary.
Well,
We need the landlords on board.
It's like on eviction.
Where are they tonight?
Yeah,
I think that could be in project for next year.
yeah.
We used to have one of those before.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the next big effort for TLC, but I think that, I want to thank Andrew in particular, but all the members of the subcommittee for doing this really good work. We've got this report. Ann Venezia reviewed this and said that they have essentially already been like adopting some version of these recommendations that we're making to the county board, but I think it's still important to pass this report along to the county board and say, this is what we want and this is what we think should happen. It's great that the staff are doing some version of this already. But in particular, I noted that a presentation of salient trends should be made to TLC or its counterparts at a predetermined cadence. I don't think that's really happening yet, or at least not in a structured way. And Heather's presentation was fantastic. I'm really excited about the fact that they're collecting that data now. And I think that could, be the launching off point for this new subcommittee that I've been discussing. Any thoughts or questions about the report or the recommendations that it makes? Otherwise, we'll go into another vote to approve it as written, to be sent in a letter to the county board.
And I move we submit the letter to the county board.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Hear it?
Aye.
Fantastic.
Aye.
That motion is unanimously approved. I will provide the report with a cover letter to the county board. And that brings us to announcements. I think, Roll, that there are a couple for you.
There are a couple. Just wanted to bring to your attention the flyer on the housing 101 sent yesterday, I believe. So if you're available or you want to pass that information on, it should be very good. It's being done by the Equal Rights Center. They're also doing our testing, their housing testing that has begun, and they are taking that on for the county this year. Yes, hopefully going forward, have a contract to do that. So there's that, and then I wanted to report an interdepartmental coordination meeting, which was held on the 19th, and that was the conversation that the subcommittee also had about this. It was fairly new. I think it's a quarterly meeting. Actually, I think it began since back in 22, 23.
Yeah, that's what Ann said.
Yeah. So it's huge, lots of department representatives, and they share information if there are any, critical things happening that cross-cuts the different departments. You hear about that, and then it's also a place where they share resources. Like at the last meeting, they showed databases being collected, information, data being collected, inspection reports. There's also housing dashboard. That information was shared, and so it's an opportunity to share all of that information. The county manager's office, the next meeting, they are going to be presenting as well as code enforcement. And then there was a landlord breakfast that was hosted by DHS. That was a couple weeks ago, end of September, and they were featuring the housing choice voucher. They demonstrated what they have is a landlord portal. based primarily on housing choice vouchers, so it's an opportunity for property managers, leasing consultants, and compliance staff. They were all there and got a presentation on this portal. And so it was an opportunity for landlords. Landlords are not necessarily required, but they would like all landlords to sign up on this portal. And it was an opportunity also to discuss any challenges and to provide feedback, either way, whatever difficulties they were having, and the staff to also give them advice and to demonstrate it. So
My only
But-
question, that sounds really interesting, particularly the portal that the landlords are using. Are they signing into that? Are they like saying, hi, I'm, Mr. Landlord from X building? Like, are
Well, I
they,
would think so. I would think that they have to indicate what property.
who is, which department is in charge of the portal?
DHS.
DHS.
Is that Russell's office?
No.
Because there's
So
been-
Russell's office is really, Russell works with the housing choice voucher.
Mhm.
So it's the Department of Human Services, this particularly the Housing Assistance Bureau. So it's Nicole's office. Nicole's unit.
So it's not the dashboard that we saw during the subcommittee. It's a different dashboard. Or
So the dashboard, I'm not sure what dashboard was. I
portal-
thought it was the HUD dashboard that was shown in.
it was like they would get their notifications and their
Yes.
letters. And
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It was that, but I think they focused specifically on housing choice voucher program, because that's what they were featuring. And how, different things that can be done, land changes and some other key areas that were being highlighted at that time. So I don't recall. So I don't know how new this is, but I got the impression it's. I don't recall that at the subcommittee.
it was the one that I think Russell showed
Russell?
us, and then we asked for access, and then
Oh, right.
your
Lucy.
colleague
Right.
wrote back and said, we wouldn't get it, but she's more than happy to.
Right.
Go
You're
for it.
more than happy to do a demonstration, just as Heather. Wanted to see all of that.
I'd be interested in seeing a demonstration. Maybe let's ask and see if they're
That's awesome.
for another. Just because now that we're thinking, now that we've gotten through this report, I think that the next effort is going to be, we talked about it a little bit today and over the past several months as well. But this landlord focused program, again, I don't know exactly what the contours of it will be, but I think that's part of the fun of having a subcommittee and imagining what it could be. And yeah.
No, I think this question was asked of Lucy before. She had given us a response.
Yeah, we didn't have Russell in June or July.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for announcements. Anything else from commissioners?
I have something. If the commissioner can send me their inquiries or recommendations for the relocation plan by Wednesday next week, so I can forward them and update or change the relocation plans. Please send me. I'll send you a reminder on Tuesday, and whatever I receive, including the parking, I'll forward it to them.
That sounds
Thank
great.
you.
We'll look forward to the reminder on Tuesday.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, commissioners?
Motion to adjourn?
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and we are adjourned. Thank you so much for attending the October 9th, 2024 meeting of the Town Landlord Commission. Have a good night.
Right.